Good evening and welcome to this week's news programme coming to you live from the heart of Wyke Regis. I'm glad you're with us. We're now well into September and winter is approaching. Other than schools returning, September always seems to me to be one of those months when nothing much happens. So I thought, first of all, I'd look back to some dates over the years to see what's happened in September in years gone by. So did you know 150 years ago on the 20th of September in 1870, Rome was captured. Italian forces defeated the Papal States and captured the city of Rome at the end of the wars of the Italian unification. The Papal States were dissolved, Rome was annexed, and it became the capital of Italy in 1871. 125 years ago on the 28th of September 1895, Louis Pasteur died. The French biologist, microbiologist and chemist was one of the main founders in the fields of medical microbiology. We will hear more about Louis Pasteur later in the month. 65 years ago, on the 22nd of September 1955, the first independent television channel, ITV, was launched. Yes, it was 65 years ago that ITV was launched. It ended the BBC's monopoly and regional ITV franchises were rolled out across the country by 1965. 60 years ago, on the 27th of September 1960, Sylvia Pankhurst, the suffragette leader, died. And 50 years ago, on the 19th of September 1970, the first Glastonbury Festival was held at Worthy Farm near Pilton. About 1,500 people attended compared to the 135,000 that attend today. It became an annual event from 1981. It is now the world's largest greenfield festival. Of course, things won't be happening much this year, but we will hear about Glastonbury next week as it is an iconic event fairly close to where we live. 25 years ago, on the 3rd of September 1995, the auction site eBay was founded, and it was called Auction Web then. Goodness, how that has grown, and how with that and Amazon and other well-known sites like that, we rely on them today. So I thought that was worth just focusing back at some of the things that happen in September, so perhaps it isn't one of those months when nothing happened. Talking about Glastonbury, I am going to do a story on Glastonbury next week, and I would love to hear from anyone who's been to the Glastonbury Festival, particularly if you'd like to share your thoughts about Glastonbury with our viewers. If you've got any video or photos that you'd like to share, please do get in touch with me. The details are up on the screen, and maybe you can take part in next week's programme. So to get the church news out of the way at the start this week, you'll remember a couple of weeks ago we told you that the main church service on a Sunday in Wyke Regis was going to change to 9:15. This did result in quite a few comments, I have to say, and as a result, Brother Alistair, our rector, asked the Church Council to consider moving back to the original time of 9:30, where it, of course, has been for several years. The Church Council has now considered that and agreed, and we are going to revert to 9:30 a.m. for our main Sunday morning service and live stream immediately from tomorrow. I guess the story is here, if a U-turn is good enough for the government, it's good enough for us, and it shows we're listening. The time originally was changed, actually, joking aside, for good reasons, and in time for the reopening of St Edmund's Church in October, so that the clergy doing the service at All Saints could say goodbye to people as they left the church, and then go down to St Edmund's and welcome people to the service, rather than at the current time, or before the coronavirus, where you're rushing out of the door of All Saints and rushing in the door of St Edmund's as the service is starting, because there's only 20 minutes between the two services. Of course, we're now going to need to rethink what we do, and the Church Council will be looking at that after the October annual elections. In the national news this week, the government has updated its advice on coronavirus. And this has become important because we are seeing an increase in the number of people, both locally and across the country, who are affected by coronavirus, unfortunately. In fact, today's figures, released just a couple of hours ago, show 3,497 people tested positive in the last 24 hours. And that, in fact, is up 36% since the figures for last Saturday. The government have announced some new strategies to try and stem the increase. And one of them is the rule of six, which you've been hearing about this week. And I know you will have been worrying, like many other people, how it affects things like church and community groups and things that you regularly attend, especially as it's coming into force this coming Monday, just a couple of days away. Well, the answer is, if we are sensible, it will not affect things like church, other meetings or community groups that are organised by organisations or big businesses, especially if they're organised in a COVID secure way. So in church, things held in community buildings like Scouts, Guides, Slimming World, dance and Keep Fit classes can all carry on as before. It is social gatherings and unofficial gatherings and going to the pubs in large groups and restaurants in large groups that are affected. To explain, the government tells us you must not attend in groups larger than 6 unless everyone is from the same household or support bubble, and government advice is to limit your interaction to the group you are attending with. Within these groups, while interacting may take place, social distancing between different households should be maintained. This means that up to 6 people may arrive together or go home together, but not interact with other people while they're at the venue they're going to, whether it's the church or the pub. So you can come to church in a group of 3 or 4, you can go to the pub in a group of 3 or 4, but what they're asking is that your group of 3 or 4 doesn't mix with another group of 3 or 4 closely while you're there, and you keep social distance, etc., so that we're reducing the number of interactions. To give us a local perspective and an update on the local situation with coronavirus, we're now joined first this evening by Sam Crowe, who is the Director of Public Health for Dorset, to update us on the local situation.
Hi, I'm Sam Crowe, Director of Public Health for Dorset and BCP Councils. I'm just here to give you a quick update on coronavirus. So this week we're definitely seeing more cases of coronavirus. We're really lucky through July and August we probably saw 2 to 3 cases a day across each council. We're now seeing perhaps 6 or 7 cases a day in each council, so a definite upturn in cases. Most of those cases we know are linked with travel, and we've got a really high completion rate through test and trace at the moment, so we're confident that we're managing to follow up on all of those cases and their contacts and limit the further spread of the virus. But as schools go back this week, it's a really good reminder that we do have to go back to basics. Remember those core public health messages of watching your distance, washing your hands. If you're in an enclosed space where you can't maintain a 2-metre social distance, wear a mask. And that's not just because we need to break transmission of the virus, but also some of the consequences of the test and trace system. So what we know this week from schools going back is that most have returned safely with no incidents at all. But where we do have the odd positive case of coronavirus connected with a school, we have to work through on a case-by-case basis to take prompt action where we need to. And if you have a positive case in a workplace setting like a school, if you've been a little bit more relaxed about your social distancing, you may get caught up in that requirement for close contacts to self-isolate. And if that happens to a small school, that could be the difference between continuing to stay open or having to close just because of the number of staff that would have to be asked to self-isolate. So it is rising slightly. We're continuing to monitor the situation very, very closely. We'll be doing more communications this week just to remind people of the basic messages, and we'll be keeping a very close eye on it over the next few weeks.
Thank you very much, Sam, for that update. Carrying on with local news, unfortunately this week there has been an attack on a woman during the early hours of Thursday the 10th of September in a footpath at the junction of West Hill Road and South Road, Wyke Regis. Wyke is generally a very safe place, and I know this will have been a shock and concern to some people within Wyke to learn. It only became apparent on Friday when Dorset police were informed by another police force We don't know any more details about the victim or the offence itself, but we think it probably is a holidaymaker that's been affected and has probably travelled home and then reported to their local force. There was also another attack elsewhere in Weymouth, in Dennis Road, Weymouth, in the early hours of Thursday morning as well. Dorset Police are telling us that there is nothing at the moment to link the two attacks. Of course, if you live in the area and you've heard anything or noticed anything suspicious late on Wednesday night or on the early hours of Thursday morning, get in touch with Dorset Police either on 101, or if you want to contact them anonymously through Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111, or of course, if you see something immediately suspicious and something underway, contact them as an emergency call on 999. And it goes without saying, do consider your own safety if you're going out during the hours of darkness alone. In other hot news off the press today, Asda, Co-op, Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrisons and Lidl's have all announced urgent recalls of a number of items. The products are all being recalled as they have unlisted ingredients in them, such as peanuts, gluten and egg, that may cause problems for some people who are allergic to these substances. Now, the products that are being recalled are Tiger Spicy Pad Thai Paste, Uncle Roy's Rabi Super horseradish, Vandermullen Melba Thins Originals, and Co-op Chocolate Caramel Shortcake Bites, and Country Products Snack Shed Milk Chocolate Coated Jumbo Raisins. So if you know you've got any of those products, they might have something in that is not on the label, and if you are possibly allergic to any of those substances that I mentioned earlier, you may wish to return those products back to the store that you purchased them from, obviously for a refund or replacement. Okay, moving on to something completely different. Are you a keen gardener? And do you struggle with the weeds and things like ivy in your garden and growing up your walls or up your house? Have you ever taken time to think about the ivy and whether it's really a friend or a foe in the garden? Well, that was the task that Janet was set this week to go and find out about.
Hello. Now, I'm not a great gardener, but I am very proud of my garden, and I try to keep it colourful and a nice place for people, as well as birds and insects. But one of my problems is the ivy, which persists in climbing up the walls. The more I cut it back, the more it grows. This is because the fibrous roots which cling to my wall are only there to help it climb. When it comes to nourishment, it needs the roots deep down in the ground. And they are very difficult to get rid of. But should I really be trying to get rid of it? Or does it do some good for the environment? Even now, with autumn coming, the ivy flower is in bloom. It isn't spectacular to look at, but it is an important source of nectar for bees, moths, flies and wasps. Not everybody's favourite insects, but they all play a vital part in nature's jigsaw. The ivy produces these flowers from September to November. After the flowers come the fruits, little dark berries with rigid sections and resembling tiny black footballs, and they each contain 5 seeds. They're poisonous for us, but birds love them. Those familiar leaves have different shapes according to whether they are on flowering or non-flowering branches. The flowers are surrounded by heart or spear-shaped leaves, while the rest of the plant has 3 or 5 pointed ones, the ones we all recognise. Well, the way time is moving on, it won't be long before we're all singing the holly and the ivy, even if we do have to do it in our own homes. Have you ever noticed, though, that the ivy is only mentioned in the first line of the carol and is absent from the rest of the verses? This is because The Holly and the Ivy is based on a much older song with no Christian content in it. The name of the song is The Contest of the Holly and the Ivy. What we see being played out in this song is the rivalry between men and women, thinly disguised as the contest between the holly and the ivy. Holly was conceived of as being masculine in the plant symbology of the time, probably because it's more rigid and prickly, while the softer ivy is associated with the feminine in this tradition. I don't think I can make any comment on that. But when we sing it this Christmas, let's remember the beautiful ivy flowers as well as the holly. And perhaps I better keep it on my walls.
So what do you reckon? Friend or foe? The ivy. Well, who knows? I'd be interested to know your views. Of course, this week, yesterday in fact, also is the anniversary of 9/11, when on the 11th of September 2001, there were 4 coordinated attacks in the USA, leading to just under 3,000 fatalities and 25,000 injuries. Do you remember what you were doing that day when the news broke? I know that I was driving back from a meeting in Bath when I heard on the radio that a plane had flown into one of the Twin Towers, at the time of the first news report thought to be an accident. By the time I got back to Weymouth and somebody had a TV on in the office, a second plane had flown into the second tower and the building had collapsed. Let's just take ourselves back to those events of that awful September day in 2001. The September 11 attacks were often referred to as 9/11, were a series of 4 coordinated terrorist attacks by the Islamic terrorist group Al-Qaeda against the United States. The attacks resulted in 2,977 fatalities, over 25,000 injuries, many of whom had substantial long-term health effects, in addition to at least £10 billion in infrastructure and property damage. It is the single deadliest terrorist attack in human history and the single deadliest incident for firefighters and law enforcement officers in the history of the United States, with 343 and 72 killed respectively. 4 passenger airlines which had been departed from airports in northeast United States bound for California were hijacked by 19 Al-Qaeda terrorists. 2 of the planes, American Airlines Flight 11 and United Airlines Flight 175, crashed into the north and south towers respectively of the World Trade Center complex in Lower Manhattan. Within an hour and 42 minutes, both 110-story towers collapsed. Debris and the resulting fires caused a partial or complete collapse of all other buildings in the World Trade Center complex, including the 47-story 7 World Trade Center tower, as well as significant damage to 10 other large surrounding structures. A third plane, American Airlines Flight 77, was crashed into the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense, in Arlington County, Virginia, which led to the partial collapse of the building's west side. The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, was initially flown towards Washington, D.C., but crashed into a field in Stony Creek Township, Pennsylvania, after passengers thwarted the hijackers. Suspicion quickly fell onto Al-Qaeda. The United States responded by launching the War on Terror and invading Afghanistan to depose the Taliban, which had failed to comply with US demands to expel Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan and extradite their leader, Osama bin Laden. Many countries strengthened their anti-terrorism legislation and expanded the powers of law enforcement and intelligence agencies to prevent terrorist attacks. Although bin Laden initially denied any involvement, in 2004 he claimed responsibility for all of the attacks. The destruction of the World Trade Center and nearby infrastructure seriously harmed the economy of the New York City and had a significant effect on the USA and global markets. That, together with the attacks on the Pentagon and the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, shocked people worldwide. On this, the anniversary of 9/11, let's make sure we don't forget those 2,977 people who died and the thousands injured and those with lasting effects. And let's hope we never face another incident like this again, anywhere in the world. I'm sure for most of us it's like those that remember the day where they were when JFK was shot or when John Lennon was shot. I'm sure 9/11 is one of those days for those that were around at that time we'll not forget as long as we live. Now, for something a bit more cheerful, it's that time in the programme where I get to play my birthday jingle. Let's hope it works this week because it often gets stuck, but let's see what happens. I shouldn't have said that, should I? Let's hope it doesn't get stuck. I think I need some oil in my birthday jingle or a new birthday jingle. Maybe for next week I'll find myself a new birthday jingle. Anyway, most importantly, let's wish a happy birthday to Alison Warren, whose birthday it is in the coming week. Now, Alison Warren may not seem familiar to you, but this is John Masters, who serves at our 8 o'clock service when we had our 8 o'clock, daughter. So a very happy birthday to Alison for the coming week. And whilst mentioned John and Christine Masters, that's Alison's mum and dad, are celebrating their wedding anniversary, their 53rd wedding anniversary. So a very happy wedding anniversary to John and Christine, and a happy birthday to their daughter Alison for this week. Don't forget to let me know here if you're having a birthday or any other special occasion so we can give you a mention in a future week's programme. Again, the details are on top of the screen, email or telephone to give me a call. Well, we heard about the holly and the ivy. Now let's think about something different. Let's think about the hedgerows. There's a lot going on at the moment about the great outdoors and our environment and the countryside. So this week I've been thinking about our hedgerows and how they contribute to nature and the environment. During lockdown, many of us found that taking a walk and connecting with nature, the seaside or countryside, nourished us and was good for our well-being. As you're out walking, I'm sure you noticed the hedgerows on your route, whether it was in the local open space as a boundary to someone's house or land, or whether it was out in the countryside surrounding or dividing up fields. Believe it or not, our hedgerows are under threat, and we need our hedgerows back urgently. They are a part of nature's toolbox to help us reduce our carbon emissions. That was a recent message from the countryside charity CPRE, which points out that there were twice as many hedges in England before the Second World War. Since then, thousands of kilometres of hedges have been ripped up to make way for new housing, motorways and to merge and enlarge fields. The 2007 UK Countryside Survey found that there were 600,000 kilometres of managed and unmanaged hedgerows in the UK, with the vast majority of them in England. This was a significant decline on the same survey from 1984, when there were about 680,000 kilometres of hedges across Great Britain. That is a reduction of 80,000 kilometres or 50,000 miles of hedgerow. To put that another way, we have ripped out about 57,000 times the entire length of Britain, which is actually 874 miles. No wonder then that the CPRE's report, Greener, Better, Faster, Countryside Solutions to the Climate Emergency and for Green Recovery, calls for millions of pounds to be spent on new hedges. It says, by planting more trees and hedgerow, restoring peatlands and moving towards a more sustainable way of farming, we can use nature's toolbox to capture greenhouse gases from the air, while revitalising our natural environment. Students at Harper Adams University recently produced an informative video on hedgerows for the CPRE, and we're going to share that with you now.
Hedgerows are a key feature in the British landscape. They cover roughly 2.5% of the landscape and are the most widespread, semi-natural habitat in the UK. Most hedgerows provide cultural, historic and environmental value, and some were as old as the 13th century, being developed to close off land and keep in livestock. Between 1998 and 2007, the total length of managed hedgerow decreased by 6.1% in the UK, often being replaced by lines of trees. In Shropshire, an estimated 21% of hedgerows were lost between 1984 and 1990. Since then, hedgerow regulations have been introduced to prevent the removal of hedgerows without permissions. The Climate Change Committee have now called for a 40% increase in hedgerows in the UK by 2050. However, research has shown the West Midlands to be the only region nationally to show a decline in hedgerow protection. Hedgerows are valuable wildlife corridors linking habitats together. They deliver numerous ecosystem services providing food, maintaining climate stability and pollination. 80% of a field's biodiversity is in hedgerows. They also supply 80% of our woodland birds, 50% of our mammals and 30% of our butterflies. Development and agriculture both threaten the conservation of hedgerows. Hedgerows have been referred to as shelter belts, and removing these has led to the loss of natural shelters, resulting in more damage to crops and increased soil erosion. Arable agriculture has been a key element of hedgerow loss. Historically, hedgerows have been used as ownership boundaries and keeping livestock in fields. However, since the agricultural revolution, calling for larger fields as a result of larger machinery, many hedgerows were removed. Nowadays, fencing is more often used to keep livestock in fields. There are now tighter controls to try and prevent the destruction of hedgerows. Under EU legislation, hedgerows cannot be trimmed between the 1st of March and the 1st of September to protect nesting birds. Hedge laying is a traditional practice used to rejuvenate the hedge, where the stems are cut partially at the base and then lowered across the hedgerow. Other management practices include coppicing, where these stems are completely removed. These practices attempt to fill in the gaps caused by poor management, age, heavy shade or intensive livestock grazing. An effectively managed hedgerow will be thick and bushy and will provide shelter, food and a barrier for livestock. Hedgerows are a vital feature of the British landscape, providing habitats for wildlife and historic value. Their effective management is key to ensure they can continue to provide valuable services for our countryside.
So there we go, hedgerows, something that perhaps we don't think about, but actually do contribute a major thing towards our environment. On another local story now related to environmental matters, viewers will, I am sure, know that there is a plan to build a waste incinerator at Portland. Today, local people and environmental protesters have been out as part of a national day of action, making sure their views are heard. Today has seen environmental protests all over the country. For our own local community, there has been a march and a protest meeting against the Portland Waste Incinerator. Plans for the Portland Waste Incinerator would see it being built on land owned by Portland Port, who support the scheme. It will be situated right by the sea on Balaclava Bay. To the west, it borders directly onto the steep slope of the Verne Citadel. This means that it would need a large chimney stack, and the emissions from the chimney stack will be exiting at over 57 metres above the sea level. The Isle of Portland itself is a dead end, far removed from the waste treatment centres where the waste would come from, and of course it is served by a single road across the Portland Beach Causeway, with this being fed from the very busy road corridor through Portland Road at Wyke Regis and before that Lanehouse Rocks Road. The incinerator would burn up to 180,000 tonnes of refuse-derived fuel a year, and all of this would need to be transported to the incinerator. Presuming most of this would be coming by road, it will mean many journeys a day. So today, around 350 local people gathered in what I can only say was a very responsible way, socially distanced, wearing masks, etc. This was to make sure that local voices who are against the incinerator could be heard. It is understandable that the proposals for the waste incinerator at Portland have been a cause for local concern from people from Portland, Wyke and Weymouth. Our own rector and Portland Road resident brother Ali Kay is a keen environmental campaigner and someone involved heavily in schools, and he was one of the speakers at the event, as was Portland Town Councillor Giovanna Lewis and Weymouth Town Councillor Graham Lambert. It's good to see local people making their views known in a responsible way. So often we see coverage on the news where this has not been the case. Whether you are for the incinerator itself or not, and I guess there will be views on both sides, there is no doubt that extra lorries, around 30 or 40 a day I guess, using our already overcrowded roads through Wyke Regis will make our roads much busier, more difficult to cross for everyone, and will be putting a lot of more carbon monoxide into the air we breathe in. Our roads are already difficult to negotiate, difficult to park on, and a concern in terms of safety for parents and children to cross on the way to and from our schools. So on these grounds alone, the incinerator will not be welcome before anyone has any view on the incinerator itself. Those that attend All Saints Church at the top of Portland Road will know how difficult it is to park to attend church services, and more importantly how difficult to cross the road safely with either speeding vehicles or the constant flow of vehicles on the road. So increased traffic on the Portland Road is certainly a concern for church members. Also, I have seen personally how gravestones in our graveyards made from local stone have been damaged by the acids and toxins from vehicle fumes, so much so that inscriptions that were clear and readable 25 years ago can no longer be read today. So why does anyone need to think about building an incinerator? Well, I guess the hard facts are we are producing too much rubbish. There is far too much packaging on what we buy in the shops, whether it's food items or household accessories. And we can't simply continue to keep burying this waste all in the ground or offloading our waste onto third world countries to deal with. We can do our bit by telling our supermarkets we don't want so much packaging, buying items with little or no packaging where we can, making sure we recycle or reuse everything we can, and ensuring our politicians know that this is something we all care deeply about and we want tackled. So let's hope that our local authorities, local planners and local politicians not only look at the plans and the evidence, but do listen to the weight of local opinion in respect of the incinerator. They have to remember they are there to serve their local communities, and first and most importantly, they should have their local communities and residents foremost in their minds when making these important decisions. There we go. That's my view on the Portland incinerator. The protests have happened today, and hopefully our local authorities thinking of us, the people of Portland, Wyke Regis and Weymouth, in the decisions they're making. Before we finish tonight, I thought we'd go back to coronavirus. Unfortunately, it affects everything we do every day of the week these days, and there is nothing more important to all of us that we keep ourselves, our friends, our families safe. The government are really trying their best to keep it simple, and they are now pushing the hands, face, space message as a very, very simple way of reminding ourselves of the three main things that we can do to protect ourselves and others from coronavirus. So from a church perspective, with my church hat off, if you're coming to church or if you're going to other organisations where it's Slimming World, Keep Fit, Scouts or whatever, or even to the local shop, you should follow these simple, sound steps. It is good advice. Cover your face, wash your hands frequently and keep your distance. The government have put out a nice little video to explain why we're doing this, and I thought before we finish I would share that with you tonight.
I wash my hands to protect my family.
I wear a face covering to protect my mates.
I make space to protect my nan.
Hands.
Face.
Space.
I wash my hands to protect my colleagues.
I wear a face covering to protect strangers.
I make space to protect you.
Hands.
Face.
Space.
As we spend more time indoors, we need to do whatever we can to help protect each other. So please, wash hands, cover face, make space.
There we go, a simple message that can really make a difference. And the one thing it doesn't say, which I would also say with my own background on, if you are using your hands, and you've been somewhere, please make sure you wash them before you touch your face, because that's one of the main ways that this virus gets into your system. So we're getting towards the end of this week's programme. It seems to have gone very, very quick tonight. It seems to take a lot of time to prepare, but it's over in just a jiffy. But let me remind you that we've got our usual weekly quiz at 7:30 tonight. And anybody's welcome to join that. It's not just for church members or just for people from Wyke Regis. We're more than happy for anybody to join us and partake in our quiz at 7:30. Don't forget, if you've been to Glastonbury, I'd like to hear from you, ideally in plenty of time for next week, because I'm going to put a story together on Glastonbury. For those of you that are coming to church tomorrow, remember it is back to 9:30, and that is for our service in church at All Saints, and also our live stream service, which hopefully will work. If it doesn't work, we will play the recording at 6 p.m. on Sunday evening. Tuesday, 5 o'clock will be evening service in church, and 10:30 Wednesday morning will be our said communion. So don't forget, let me know about Glastonbury. Let me know if you've got a birthday or other celebration coming up. And if you've got a story, anything local or anything you're passionate about, or you're planning an event, or you've got any other news that you think would be worthy of sharing with the people of Wyke, Weymouth and beyond, do get in touch with me. We want to hear from you. This is your programme and we want it to feature the things that you want. So until the same time next week, 6 p.m. Saturday, it's good night from me.